I'm going to call this meeting to order. Can you please stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge of Allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Can you please put your phones on silent so it doesn't interfere with the Wi-Fi, with the internet service. So today's meeting is a workshop to discuss the town budget. I'm going to turn it over to Carol Howe, who will brief us on the budget.
I apologize, my back's towards you. If you want to bring your chairs around, but you're welcome to stay where you're at. Didn't realize our setup. Okay, Mayor and Council. So, of course, we're happy to be here to discuss our proposed budget for FY27. But before we start, I want to thank Dawn Parks, our Finance Director, of course, and our department heads, Chief McLaughlin, Matthew Martin, and Ken Simino, for all of their work and their help leading up to the point where we were able to present the proposed budget to you. Can't do it without everybody's support. This is actually the 8th budget that Dawn and I have worked on presenting for you, which blows both of our minds, but we're really happy to do it and feel really good about what we've been able to put together for this year. And the presentation of the budget and the presentation of this workshop have been available on the website for the public. This meeting, of course, will be on our YouTube feed forever for anybody that wants to tune in and listen to it. But with that, I'll get going. And we do have 6 packets of the presentation right back here. Mayor and Council, you all have the packets, and so I'm just going to get started. So I wanted to go over some of the most important takeaways. First and foremost, we have proposed a balanced budget, of course, that we believe meets all the current needs of our town and supports our operations. It's a budget that has no current requirement for a tax rate increase. If supported by Mayor and Council, the tax rate for FY27 will remain at 0.2578 per $100 assessed value. The operating budget as proposed totals $7,065,000, and the capital program totals $3,900,000. If approved as proposed, this capital program represents the second highest investment year in our community's infrastructure in the last 5 years. It includes investments in our streets, sidewalks, parks, drainage improvement, and equipment. It's actually really, we have some exciting opportunities, I think. As you know, staff and I evaluate and presented the move from the state of Delaware health plans to that of Delaware Valley Health Trust. This will take effect on July 1st of this year, and we project equal or more benefits plus cost savings. The fee schedule that's approved with the budget has modifications recommended in association primarily with actual costs that were researched and additions. And with initial guidance from the Mayor and Council, the proposed budget also includes a cost of living allowance of 3% for employees, the new pay scale for sworn officers that came following the completion of our total compensation study, and contractual increases for the chief and myself as negotiated. This, the next slide.
Should be page 3.
Page 3.
Right there.
Perfect. Thank you, Russ. So this slide provides a 5-year outlook, including our proposed capital projects. Of special note is the column highlighted in yellow, which represents our next fiscal year, what we're primarily here to discuss, and highlighted in green is the fiscal year coming to an end on April 30th. If you look to the green column, you'll note that we budgeted for the use of unassigned fund balance in FY26 to fund the 2 studies that you're aware that we've conducted this past year. It's in the amount of $69,500. They were the risk assessment and the total compensation study. You'll also note that again in the green column, and you'll recall that we also came to you during this fiscal year for support to utilize some unassigned fund balance for costs associated with the Burzins Park and police vehicles. Unless we end the year ahead and don't need to, and I'm just pointing these 2 things out because they might be things that might have been a question or confusing. And by the way, we do feel confident that we will not need to utilize those funds. You'll also note in the yellow column representing the FY27 budget that there's a recommended use of unassigned fund balance again for Burzins. This time it's towards the final amenities and it totals the $235 that you'll see there. That's half of what we need for the amenities. We'll be seeking grants, of course, and or we may be able to cover the cost or reduce the cost. But I wanted to again point this out. The balance of the funds for Burzins' final amenities is also included in our discussion of borrowing, which we'll have later in this presentation. So with that all said, we have projected that absent any new requirements or opportunities requiring funds, we will end FY27, the next fiscal year, we're forecasting with our unassigned fund balance at $2.1 million. And as a reminder, this funding source is our reserve for operations. And it still falls well within the funding level that we're comfortable with that and what the auditors or others would recommend. Next slide. So in regard to our 5-year outlook and budgeting for it, we've only included grants that are already secured. While we intend to continue our efforts to obtain grant funds that our departments have been very successful at to accomplish projects and initiatives. We've included the cost of funding the code-required full town reassessment, which will take place this fall for the May of 2027 tax billing. We're still evaluating the best timing to move to the Sussex County assessment numbers and feel we should have all of the information necessary by August to make a recommendation to Council. We're taking a very cautious approach in regard to final determinations being made by Sussex County in regards to their commercial assessment, as well as the impact of timing of billing for new development parcels. Making a decision by August is aligned with our need to provide the necessary notice to the current town assessors should we find there's no lingering unintended consequences for moving to their assessment. Some of you may recall that in 2017, it was before my time, I think it was 17, the town went to the counties and there were unintended consequences. And it was as a result of the fact that they had not reassessed for so many years. And then the town went back to its own assessor after a lot of concern raised about it. So we want to make sure that we've looked at everything and that none of us or our community will have to deal with any issues once we do go. We will eventually go. We just don't know if it's this coming year. The capital program includes a good number of projects, some associated with a new topic, that of borrowing. And again, we're going to be talking about that later in the presentation. Next slide. So this slide outlines the proposed capital program for FY27 through FY31. It's a 5-year plan of action, if you will, with a special note. The third from the bottom line item referred to as other funding source, financing, you will note substantial outlays in the first 3 of 5 years. These outlays represent us getting identified projects completed, some of which have been on hold and awaiting funding, Again, we're going to talk about it in more detail. Next slide. So, as noted earlier, we've proposed no tax rate increase for FY27. As always, before we brought the proposed budget to you, we considered opportunities for reductions that would not adversely impact operations or any required activities. To that end, we trimmed cost and adjusted revenue that amounted to $101,370 in revisions. Of note is the use of $82,155 from the proceeds of the water distribution sale. That was a decision we made when we made all the other decisions about where we would place some of the funds from the sale. And some more of that will be brought up as I go on. Next slide. So before we go into everything else, I think it's time to look at how our efforts of FY26 impacted our FY27 proposed budget. As you're fully aware, the sale of the town's water distribution system closed in April of last year. As a result, the town's water fund is no more. It's been dissolved. The proceeds from the sale impact the FY27 proposed budget with prior council support and direction in the following ways. Two of our existing trust funds received a boost of $300,000 each. The town paid off all of its debt, and all of our debt that we had was associated with the original development of the water system. As noted on the prior slide, we boosted revenue to balance the proposed budget by $82,155, and the balance of the proceeds have been earmarked to create a new trust fund, more specifically the Tax Rate Stabilization Trust Fund, with $1.4 million. That is something that we'll talk about in more detail as well. We also completed two significant important studies, the Ocean View Total Compensation Study linked to officer retainage and recruitment that resulted in council's support for implementation of a pay scale with steps that will be effective in this proposed budget May 1st. The second was the IACP legal and risk analysis, which is prompting an increase in our liability insurance, outreach to Sussex County for additional revenue sharing funds, and language improvement for State of Delaware police mutual aid legislation. Next slide. So the Tax Rate Stabilization Fund. I am just so excited to share the details related to this, the establishment of this, this fund with the proceeds from the water system sale. We've talked about it a lot, but it's new, it's unique, and it bears some discussion now, of course. The plan, as discussed with council and our financial consultants from PFM, will utilize the $1.4 million from the water system sale proceeds to seed fund the Tax Rate Stabilization Trust Fund that can benefit our property owners in the years ahead. This value, the $1.4 million, is the current value of 10 cents of the tax dollar. If we were to raise the taxes by 10 cents this year, the value is $1.4 million. The fund, to be implemented in FY27 and first available for consideration of use of the funds in FY28, may provide up to 2 cents of tax rate increase credit to all property owners for that year of the increase. This is to provide a smoothing effect and to support operations any given year. The ordinance to create the Tax Rate Stabilization Trust Fund has been developed and will be placed on your council agenda for the March 10th meeting. In addition, to ensure funds long-term availability, the funds will be invested and there will be a requirement to repay used funds during the very next code-required every 5-year full-time reassessment. Doing so offers us the opportunity to provide another smoothing for the demonstrated need of a tax rate increase, as well as every 5-year smoothing of impact on property owners when we're assessing property values for equity. Establishing this tax rates fund, I'm not going to keep saying the whole thing, it's a mouthful, in this fashion is very unique. It's expected to be an effective tool for addressing the common concern related to tax rate increases while supporting the funding needs to maintain service level. Of note, if adopted and implemented as proposed, this new trust will not be funded by transfer taxes like our other existing trust funds, but will maintain unused funds that are invested and be replenished during town-wide reassessments every 5 years. If we don't need a tax rate increase, none of it will be used. If we need it, we can use up to 2 cents. If we need 4 cents, you can use 2 cents. Or we may, or whoever's here at the time may make a recommendation that you only use 1. It'll all be an evaluation, another evaluation that we'll perform as we're forecasting for the next year. Next slide. Revenue projections for FY27 are shared on this slide, with property taxes, of course, remaining our prime revenue stream, typical for most local municipalities, followed by transfer taxes, which, again, transfer taxes funnel into our original trust funds and are not relied on for operations. And then third would be the gross rental receipts tax. You of course know we don't have very many revenue streams. The decision to not utilize the transfer taxes for operations was a great decision made years ago, and we're hoping that we continue by making good decisions to assist us going forward. Next slide. So here we share the recent history of our tax rate increases. I'm happy to say that we've been in a position to limit increases while maintaining service levels, including a 3-cent reduction in FY23 that we held steady for 2 additional years. And of course, this proposed budget maintains the FY26 tax rate for a second year. The availability of the Tax Rate Stabilization Trust Fund, if needed, it is expected to assist in managing the need for large jumps in tax rate in the future. Next slide. So this slide shows our FY27 expenses, expense projections rather. Much like prior years with public safety, administration, and public works, including street repairs, require the highest level of support, and much of which also includes personnel costs, as is customary for local governments. Next slide. This slide shares a year-over-year comparison from FY26 to FY27. Of course, our move into the structured pay scale for sworn officers for retainage and competition for officers in the field increased the differences for public safety year to year. Next slide. Just wanted to share an overview of the assumptions made in relationship to health insurance and other personnel-related benefits, including a savings of approximately $30,000 for making the move to the Delaware Valley Health Trust. We share the proposed cost share for employees for health plan selections here, and the continuation of short-term disability and dental coverage, plus year 1 of the Delaware paid family medical leave, which just started January 1st. Last year, we did provide basic information about the Delaware Paid Family Medical Leave insurance plan, and we provide some here again. Ocean View has more than 25 employees, so we're required to provide all lines of paid family medical leave coverage. We have implemented this mandated program through a private insurance carrier versus the state of Delaware. The paid leave availability opportunity began at the beginning of January this year, so 2 months ago. We have not had an opportunity to use it. No one's put in a claim, but I anticipate that we will have some in the very near future. So Again, this is everybody, there's different rates depending on how many employees you have, but this is a requirement that, that everybody, all employers have now. Next slide. So moving on to a different topic, but one which we need a decision on ultimately, is that of responding to a request made late last year regarding adding non-secular displays, that's religious themed displays, to our seasonal holiday displays throughout the town and here in the park. You may recall that our response to the requester was that it's too close to the season and that we would consider such additions as part of the FY27 budget. We were also guided by the town solicitor in understanding the full impact of doing so as we started our budget process. Currently, our holiday displays fall into the category of secular, which means they're not considered religious. That includes the holiday tree, the arrival of Santa Claus, and the trail of lights at the park, and the wreaths that are on the street poles. Our solicitor has provided us with the following direction. If we begin to include non-secular religious themed displays, doing so should include no less than 3 non-secular displays that represent at least 3 different religions. Also, that these displays shall be owned, rented, or leased by the town, not by an outside group or organization. We've obtained pricing for 3 such displays. The displays we obtained quotes on are static displays that, if we move in this direction, I would recommend adding to our established Trail of Lights display right here at John West Park. While we don't need to decide this tonight, we're asking for direction regarding making the move to add non-secular religious displays. If more discussion past budget approval is deemed necessary, we can maintain funding and continue the discussion early in the new fiscal year. This topic has also prompted the need for a new policy to set forth the rules for displays on town property, just on town property, not in the town of Ocean View. As such, the policy will be presented for introduction at your March 10th meeting. And that should be done regardless of a decision about secular or non-secular, at the recommendation of the town solicitor. Next slide. This new policy recommendation from our town solicitor will set forth the rules, as I noted, for unattended displays on town property. As such, the policy will be presented for a vote at the town meeting. As noted, unattended displays on town property will only be allowed if the display is owned, leased, or rented by the town. If you approve of the policy, but it's recommended. Next slide. Okay, so this is our services at a glance slide. We always try to update this every year. It's a document that's on our website, always in our budget. John West Park is currently our location for all community events. We, of course, look forward to, within the next year and a half, including the Burzins Nature Park in our lineup of park areas. And Burzins, of course, is in its final design and preparation for bidding by June. We've listed all the known events for FY27, and we listed also the partnerships that we continue to maintain. Okay, so that is the end of the primary FY27 budget. If we could take questions for this before we move on to the conversation about borrowing, I think that would make sense, unless you have an idea of handling it a different way.
No, I think that's good. I did submit a list of questions that was given to the town council, but I would like to go on record and discuss these questions and your responses.
How do you want to handle that?
I'll read my question, and you can read the response.
Oh, there you go. That works.
All right, so I agree that we not move to the county reassessment at this time due to the hearings continuing on commercial property assessments. But if we did go to the county method, we would save the $250,000 fee to do the assessment. And would the town benefit or lose revenues from the county's assessment?
And the answer is, the $250,000 on page 129 of the budget document is not specific to the full town reassessment. It includes the regular effort that takes place during the course of any year that is estimated for FY27 at $75,000. The cost to complete the full reassessment is estimated at $175,000 for FY27. Starting the reassessment effort in October or November of this year, 26, for the FY28 May of 2027 billing and tax rate setting. So while we recommend budgeting 175, we would also like to continue to evaluate now until August the impact of the to the town and our property owners, avoiding unintended consequences as is our primary concern, as mentioned earlier. Then I further went on to say, while it would be great to save this cost, and we believe we will be in a position to recommend at some point moving to Sussex County's assessment, we currently are in communication with Sussex County, and we're still in communication with them. There's some assessed values that are not matching up from the files that they provided us for certain developments in the community and some of the newer developments. The file also contains 68 commercial properties that are assessed over 12 million higher than the town's assessment. That, of course, would be a big surprise to the property owner. So how they were assessed and things like that is being evaluated by Sussex County for commercials. So we're going to continue to work on this, and as your questions came before I wrote the notes for the workshop today. So while we have a little bit more information, we're not there yet, but our plan is, after talking to the current town assessor, that we will make a decision and make a recommendation, rather, for you to make a decision by August, so that it's fair to them before they actually would have to start. Okay?
Thank you. This is just a statement. I said, since 68% of the population of Ocean View is over 55, we should continue to ensure the quality of life for this age group through town activities and its walkability. So.
Yes, and we said we agree fully.
All right, so in the budget, on page 23, there is a graph. It has a circle for seniors living alone that shows 17%, which is lower, not higher than the state average. And your response was?
Yeah, and we haven't gotten this you didn't get anything back, did I miss it?
Not yet.
So information is imported into the budget document from the American Community Survey, 5-year estimates. It's census.gov. However, my interpretation is that the bottom right is attempting to state that Ocean View's 17% of seniors living alone is 37% higher than the state's average. But we have communicated to them electronically, the only way that we have been able to do so. But we're going to try to confirm that, to see if there's an error.
It's not consistent with the other circles and how you interpret those circles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So okay. we don't have that answer. Hopefully we'll have it by next week, if not sooner. But it could just be something that somebody entered incorrectly.
Okay.
On their end, I'm not sure.
Under the proposed fee schedule, John West Park amenities, in the first one, group with membership comprised entirely of Ocean View property owners and residents, should be consistent with the ones that are below it, where the renter fee is $50. I believe it's difficult to prove that all members using the park are owners or residents of Ocean View.
Yeah, so our response is, we can do this, but it's a park for our property owners, it's a perk for our property owners, rather, holding an event, typically a reunion, birthday party type of thing, to be able to hold the event at our park and know the amenity of choosing will be available to them. Typically, it's the pavilion and the grill area. Keep in mind that people can just show up and use the pavilion, etc., without a permit to do so anytime. It's a public park. The permit process, however, allows people to be sure that they will have use of the amenity, and they're having the right as opposed to being an approved permit right here at the park. We have had to do this. This is something we instituted since I've been here, because we have had somebody just show up while somebody else already had it, and they wouldn't leave. And the police who came to the scene couldn't do anything because there was nothing posted. Okay, so we put that in effect, and we haven't had a problem since. Okay, that's not to say we won't, but we haven't had it in at least 5 years. So absent having staff there all the time, which is not advisable, this is the best I feel we can do. The park is open to the public, town property owners, and others from anywhere, as most public parks such as this are. So use of the pavilion by a few groups or families at a time does happen, with no regard to residency. But with that said, maybe we could charge in-town applicants to use park amenities under a permit situation, $25 versus non-town property owners, $50. They all pay the deposit, which is returned if everything's fine afterwards. And if this is desired, we can update the fee schedule during the budget process to town park amenity rentals for $25 if the council so desires.
Okay, thank you.
I understand your question, I just don't, we're just never going to be able to really manage it.
Right, okay. On page 52, the First Amendment assemblies, I thought we approved in November the fee to be $25, not $100 or $150.
Yeah, so that was a great catch, and it will be corrected in the final draft. The wrong version was pulled. The title is Community Events versus Assemblies in Town Parks and Town Properties, with a $25 fee for 50 people or more, fines of up to $250 for revocation, fines up to $50 up to revocation of fee waiver, and a fee waiver for indigent applicants with proof. You will recall we recently went through this effort, and this is legally the way that this portion of the ordinance had to play out. And I'm glad you caught that, and I apologize for the error.
Okay, on page 58, can you explain the Government Finance Officers Association chart? Looking at fiscal year 27, I'm not sure what projected from previous fiscal years means, and why it's projected to increase for 4 months from 2.1 million to 2.35 million. I think it's misleading.
Yeah, okay. So, I want to make sure I'm on the right one.
I said the reason I think it's
Okay, yeah.
misleading is because at 17% of the operating budget, at $200,177 for 2 months, and $400,353 for 4 months, and I'm just a little confused.
Yeah, so what we responded was that it relates to how much unassigned fund balance we hold. The Government Finance Officers Association likes to see 4 months of revenues in reserve. We've held up to 6 months some years. Likewise, the auditors say that they like to see no more than 4 months and are okay with 2 months, but lenders like 4 months or more. We always try to weigh all of these guidelines, knowing that we may move forward with borrowing. We'll see how council feels about that. Having more reserve now could play in our favor. The better our rating, the cheaper it is to borrow. The strong unassigned fund balance the town had when it last went out to borrow is believed to have helped us achieve our AA+ bond rating. We're hoping to be in the same position if we do undertake borrowing in the near future, as is being recommended. The FY27 2.3 million is our forecasted funding level for the fiscal year. And then we provided some other detail. That's a bunch of numbers. That's not really something to read. Once we provided that, were you
Yeah, I get it.
satisfactory?
I get it now.
Okay. Okay, I just want to make sure. Okay.
All right. Page 63. Can you explain to me where the Blue Heron community is?
Yeah, so it's a very small development that sat stagnant off of Woodland. The owner got several extensions and finally sold it, and someone is now, Ken, do we have any plans in or anything yet for
Well,
that?
the plans haven't changed. We're waiting for final site plan approval in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission, which we anticipate will eventually take place sometime after May 1st. They're waiting on the sale to go through.
How many homes are we thinking about?
It's only 6 homes.
6.
It's a very small community. It's on Woodland Avenue.
We don't expect the same experience that we have with the other the other owner.
No, Ashburton Homes has purchased the project, and discussions we've had with them, they're keeping the same footprint that's already gone through the process, because it's literally kind of a formality now, just getting the allied agencies' approvals, the outside agencies' approvals, and then coming back in front of Planning and Zoning. And there has been discussion about 2 additional homes on an adjacent lot that's currently owned by another property owner. So there may be the possibility for eight homes there. These homes should be built very quickly.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
On page 128, I just wanted to highlight that I applaud the way you've been managing expenses in the past few years, where actuals were below the budget, as through finding ways to stay under or within our budget rather than just over projecting expenses. So I think that's great.
Yeah, and Dawn's been so spot on with her forecasting. I think you've all noticed that before, and that's just a pleasure. But all of the departments are always looking out for the best interest of the community. I truly believe that, and but we thank you for mentioning that.
And one last comment is with regard to holiday decorations. I think we ought to keep them as secular, and so that we don't get tangled in adding more than 3 religious decorations that could become very expensive for the town.
Okay, yeah, so you can't vote, you don't
Right.
vote at a workshop, so we'll have a trigger point on the March 10th meeting where we'll be discussing the new policy, and that might be an opportunity to provide that direction. I'm trying to think, we just posted the agenda today. Do we have to add something for a vote? Probably?
No, it's under discussion.
It's under discussion, and does it have possible vote? Okay, so then we probably are already okay with how it's posted. Okay, so, I mean, it's fine, if you want to make the decision now, have the conversation on the 10th, that's
No,
fine.
I think we ought to do it the way it's supposed to be done, and that's, on the 10th.
Okay, yeah, no, you can't, you can't vote
Right.
tonight, yeah, exactly, yes. Okay,
That's the only questions I have on it. Have any other questions from members of the town council? No. No? Anyone from the gallery would like to make a comment or ask a question? No?
Please feel free, and feel free to, if you notice anything later, or think about anything later, just please reach out.
Okay, then you may continue.
Okay, so now is when Russ is gonna work his magic and get our consultants involved, hooked up, but I'm gonna just say a couple things about the financing and borrowing discussion first. So, I don't know if you can put the slide up and them at the same time, but, page 19 it looks like, infrastructure financing. So as you recall, in February of '25, we got the results of a financial condition assessment that included recommendations from our financial advisors at PFM. The tax rate stabilization fund was one of them, and the recommendation to consider borrowing for long useful life projects was another. The process for doing so would be through municipal bonds that are paid off typically over 20 to 30-year periods. They also have a time frame for consideration of refinance beginning around year 7. And I would say that might be a goal of the towns at that time. And yes, we get it, we really do get it, that borrowing and taking on debt is serious business. We just paid off the water debt. But in fairness, we've been suggesting and been sharing that it was likely going to become necessary in the out years, and here we are. Borrowing has a higher cost associated with paying interest, but it also can free up our current funding resources, our cash, and have a very positive impact or reduction rather of the need for tax rate increases. Keep in mind our revenue sources are limited. Smart borrowing, planning, and thinking out of the box is important. Just like when the decision was made not to rely on transfer tax revenues for operations years ago. Just like establishing a highly unique tax rate stabilization fund is now. Absent borrowing are projects that have been identified as suitable for borrowing would require a large tax rate increase or years of kicking the can farther down the road until funds could be saved or accumulated in some other fashion. Currently, Ocean View has a AA bond rating, as mentioned earlier. It would be our hope that we would maintain that rating if it's decided to borrow, that borrowing makes sense, and Dawn and I think it does. An important follow-up to that statement is that the good news is that we're recommending our existing trust funds be utilized to pay the annual debt service for projects identified if we move down this road. Next slide. So if the decision is made to borrow for long life infrastructure projects, we can complete some significant projects sooner than later without impact to the tax rate. For the benefit of anybody watching now or later, again, our trust funds get their revenue from transfer taxes paid during the buying and selling of property. They're not funded by the general fund. Our trusts, our existing trusts, can only be used for certain types of projects, and again, we don't rely on our existing trusts for operations, only to fund projects, equipment, and initiatives. Our conservative forecasting based on information that will be presented in the slides ahead by our financial advisors from PFM informs us that the Capital Repair and Replacement Trust Fund and the Street Replacement and Repair Trust Fund can be expected to fund our debt service as follows. Next slide. This is little print on mine, but there's a lot going on here, but we wanted to be able to demonstrate to you how the borrowing, if you decide it makes sense, can play out. we have forecasted out 9 years from this fiscal year, plugged in the projects and their estimated costs, added the trust they can be funded by, and the estimated debt service payments to demonstrate the availability of funds to pay the associated debt service. I know that's a lot. If anybody wants me to, if you look at, let me get the bigger, oh, I don't have it, I gave them away. Let me grab them. Is this bigger for my eyes? If we look at that page, so you have FY '25 ending balance, 1.3 million and some. And then you have all the other years, FY '26 through FY '35. So the CRTF funding, the information underneath the 1.3, that's the money that we have forecasted we're gonna take in
From
from the transfer taxes,
the transfer.
okay? For those years, okay, conservatively. And then you have the reserve study projects that we've identified. You see how much they're gonna cost, so that's gonna come out of those funds. And then the next, C label, go ahead.
Say that again, what's gonna come out of that?
Okay, so, if you look at A,
Right,
that's the money we have and the money we think we're gonna bring in every year, okay? And then if you look at B, it's the projects, okay? And we don't have the projects listed here because it really makes it messy, but they're all listed everywhere else. So that's the cost, okay? And then the next C is the street repair and replacement trust fund. And you see where its ending balance FY '25. Of course, we don't have FY '26 finished yet, okay? Because it doesn't end till April 30th, so we have to use FY '25. Okay, so then all of that is the funding we expect to come in, the revenues for all those years down. And then next to that is the street repair and replacement trust fund projects. And keep in mind, there's certain projects that can be funded out of the capital reserve trust fund. There's certain projects that can be funded out of the street repair and replacement trust fund. So they're the projects that have been identified. Okay, and then in E, that's the debt service. So you come down to FY '28, anticipating if we were to, in this November, initiate a borrowing effort, which is going to be described better by the consultants, we would start having to pay debt service in FY '28, and it would be the first year would be $315,000. And what we're trying to demonstrate here is that we will have the funds to pay it from the trust fund, not from the general fund.
But we have been talking all along that the trust funds are gonna start losing value over time.
And this is our conservative estimate.
Well,
And this does represent that.
but it seems to me that it might be a little more advantageous than we've been led to believe over time, because you're looking at fiscal year 35, where you're gonna have transfer taxes of just over $1 million, still.
FY '35,
Yeah, if you add up the CRTF and the SRTF together, that's over $1 million in transfer tax. Isn't that rather high?
do you
That
want,
far out?
you want to enlighten it on any of that, Dawn?
Because I'm just thinking, if we don't meet the trust fund projections, our cost of servicing goes up.
And I get to
The trust fund
Our
projections,
cost- Yes, if we don't get 1.1 million in trust funds, then what we have to pay back for the bond is far more than what you're anticipating now. And so where does that come from? That's gonna-
yeah, no, all the data that we have that we can plug in, and again, the next session is going to provide you some more information. I identifies that what we have, what we're gonna add, we're gonna be able to pay for it. And at the end of this, you know, we only went down nine years, because I think the town would be having conversations around year 7 about refinancing, which it also did with the water debt. We'd still be, have balance remaining.
That also includes interest.
That does include interest.
It includes interest, not only transfer tax, but it also includes interest that we're estimating to receive from our investments
Oh, okay.
of the transfer tax.
And
Yeah,
that's-
the
that's
trust
plugged
funds
into
are
the-
invested.
Okay.
Everybody, I should have mentioned that
Yeah,
they are.
okay, I got it.
Mhm.
I didn't realize it was plugged into the,
It is,
Yeah.
it's included. Now, the trust fund under the funding, is it under our funding sources? Breaks them out individually, capital repair replacement trust and the street repair and replacement trust are broken out individually in, under section 3. So, but here it's combined together, just to make it a little more condensed.
We work different ways on how do we demonstrate this. And so if you look at E, 90% is from street repair and replacement trust, and 10% is from capital reserve trust fund. So that's as much as we're going to be able to share with you. And then next we have our consultants. Is there any questions for me before we go to that, or before we bring them on for their presentations? Okay, so we're going to have Garrett Moore and Jamie Schlesinger. You're familiar with them. They've been working with us on several things. And we also have Tanner, our town solicitors, plugged in as well. So this is their time to tell you about the town of Ocean View possibly borrowing.
Is our presentation included in the middle of this? I don't know if you want to share that.
Mayor and council all have a copy.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if people and if we have extras for the everybody for your whole presentation. I think actually I might. But other than that, mayor and council have a copy.
Okay. Well, then I'll get us started off for the first few minutes, and then Garrett will hop in. So I think you provided some, very good background behind some of the understanding associated with the concept of issuing debt long-term for capital-related projects. And as a rule of thumb, we traditionally suggest or recommend our clients consider issuances that are for projects that are for longer useful lives. It's not that hard to figure out that if you have a project that's going to be around for a long time, you should be having the constituents of the municipality covering that cost over that period of time, because it's a good rule of thumb as well as best practice for asset liability matches. Obviously, from a planning perspective, we've seen the forecast of how this can be contemplated, which the team has described, although we would be looking at this over a long period of time, because this is a long-term use of capital as well as reserves to offset that. And we were provided a list of capital projects that we did a due diligence process for. So if you turn to the second page, which would be a topics of discussion page, I think that's what we'll start with. We can talk about the market later, since we're not exactly ready to borrow funds, but like everything else, there's always a market update that will come during our presentations that you'll see from us should you decide to move forward. So generally speaking, we're in a reasonably good long-term interest rate environment. There's certainly been some volatility over the last few days. Certainly that will move as time goes on. You can turn to the next page, whoever's sharing the screen. That all being said, we'll just touch on the process by which we look into this. And it's simply put, we want to look at what you're allowed to do from a tax perspective. In all of the cases that we have to follow, we have two things that we will realize and make sure we understand, and that is making sure we're following federal tax law And that essentially means that as a local government, you are considering borrowing money that would be spent within a 3-year period. That's the general rule. We try to say spend 100% of it, although the rule says you have to spend 85% within 3 years. You have to be in positions that you're ready to do that. Based on your capital improvement plan and things that have been described, we feel pretty comfortable from a due diligence standpoint that you've met those standards. Secondarily, when you look at the bottom of this page, under bank qualified status, we would be looking to borrow funds less than $10 million, and that allows you to have the ability to refinance the debt within 7 years. And that's been described earlier today, that we would have that access to the market to refinance debt if the market conditions are available to you in a fashion to save money and reduce your payments going forward, or even pay down principal if needed. And turn to the next page. I'm going to let Garrett jump in on this.
Sure, appreciate it. As this slide kind of outlines, this is an estimated repayment schedule that'd be associated with approximately a $6.8 million borrowing. Again, I think the important thing to keep in mind here is that this page is really largely meant to be a little bit of a living and breathing document. So we're obviously here for the first time presenting some numbers to town council. We've made a few assumptions. However, to the extent town council, wants to move forward with kind of other options or see additional options, these numbers can ultimately be revised to meet the needs of the town. I should note, as I mentioned, we're funding approximately $6.8 million, and that was largely derived by the project list that Carol and Dawn had provided to us. I believe most of the projects associated with the financing would be widening projects, for instance, as well as some drainage projects and maybe some park projects. It's always important to remember when we do a financing, we need to tie the term of the financing to the anticipated useful life of the underlying projects. So put differently, most of us, when we go and buy a vehicle, don't finance the vehicle over 20 or 30 years because the car that you're purchasing isn't expected to last that long. The same rules apply here to a municipal borrowing. These projects that we're looking at realistically have a useful life of probably 20 years, give or take, which is why we started for these initial purposes assuming a term length of 20 years for this financing. Again, that can be adjusted. We can certainly finance it over a shorter time frame, but for initial discussions, we thought 20 years would be appropriate. As Jamie mentioned, and what we'll talk about on the next slide, we're assuming that this financing occurs, November timeframe of this year. To the extent that needs to be delayed at all, that can obviously happen as well. Like I said, we'll touch on a timeline here in a moment. But looking at the blue column, what you'll note is barring the first 3 years, the debt is structured as level debt service. As you don't have any existing debt, the debt you see on this page would largely be it from a general fund perspective. We have a red box drawn around those first years just to illustrate a financing option where we create a 3-year phase-in or 3-year ramp-up for your debt service to allow you, slightly more flexibility to better phase it into your budget over multiple years, as opposed to having the full $6.8 million impact your budget, right away, or put differently, in fiscal year 2028. So based on conservative interest rates, a 20-year financing for $6.8 million, the run rate that we're estimating here today is approximately $560,000 a year. So that's what we would think the impact would be. As Jamie mentioned, we've seen some volatility in the markets. Candidly, if we were able to go and issue the bonds or price the bonds today and lock in those interest rates, we'd realistically be less than the $560,000 per year. But knowing that we've got several months to kind of wait and get things teed up before we would be able to lock in interest rates, we're erring on the side of being conservative because we do have some interest rate risk. The last item I would note on this page before I turn to the topics, the timeline, and open it up to you all for questions or comments is this notion that you see on this page known as capitalized interest. So what capitalized interest is using or borrowing additional funds to cover a portion of the upfront interest expense. Or put differently, we're assuming $150,000 of capitalized interest to completely eliminate any impact to your budget in fiscal year 2027. In speaking with Dawn and Carol, we think, prudently, knowing that, you currently are in the process of working on your 2027 budget. Obviously, that's why we're here today. And knowing that there's not anything currently in the budget for 27, we thought using the capitalized interest to completely eliminate any sort of interest expense in the 2027 fiscal year would be prudent. But again, if town council decides that you want to see an option where we do not include that capitalized interest, we would certainly be happy to show that to you all. Any questions on this page before I jump to the timeline?
Can you repeat the capitalized interest one more time? Just a little.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So capitalized interest is basically borrowing more money to cover your upfront interest expense. So if we were not to fund $150,000 in capitalized interest, you would then see a 160 probably $1,000 impact in the 2027 fiscal year. So we're borrowing a little bit more so that you have those funds available to cover that interest expense for this upfront fiscal year in 2027.
Thank you.
Was that helpful?
Yep.
I have a question. Looking at this chart, over the 20-year period, we're going to be spending $4 million more on interest than for projects. Are the projects going to be equal to the borrowing that we have, or less?
The equal to
Well,
what we've been doing,
Yeah. I mean,
it's
if,
gonna be substantial, it's gonna be more.
That's why we're borrowing. These are the projects in the borrowing list. Usually our projects are, majority of our projects are under $500,000. The projects in this list generally range from $600 and some odd thousand dollars to $1.2 million each.
each, okay. So I'm trying to think,
Got a list of them here.
we just went out of debt by paying off our water utility. We made a little profit. We're gonna go back into debt, and we're gonna have to pay an extra $4 million over 20 years. If we didn't borrow the money, how long would it take you to do those projects?
Well, right now, we have 2 sidewalk projects right outside the window that have been designed and sitting on the shelf for 2+ years, almost 3 years. Those 2 projects in total, plus a component of those jobs is the 3rd project, which is the drainage on Betts Avenue between Central and West Avenue, which routinely floods with a half a foot of water. That's another $300,000 in 2023 dollars. I don't know what it is today. So those jobs with the money that we have coming in probably would take, you might be able to do one of those projects every 2 years. One of those segments of sidewalk every 2 years. So you're looking at 5 years for those 3 projects.
Or just those 3?
Yep.
How many do we have?
How many of the there's,
You got that list?
There's between drainage,
15, 16 if the playground's included, which it is right now in the numbers. And I want to mention that in addition to the projects that we would be doing funding, things that aren't 20 years that we're gonna be paying with cash, so that'll be going on as well. But if you'd like me to, do we have, is this same exact presentation in the budget document?
The top part is, the only thing we added was the playground.
Okay, so
This is,
do you know what page that do you all have your budget?
Projects are $2 million.
Okay.
John, these
Yeah.
3 projects are $2 million. The one project alone is almost $1 million.
So by waiting, you could spend much more down the road for the same projects if you didn't find
Yeah, the
this.
longer you wait, I mean, that's just, you go to the grocery store or anywhere. As the year goes by, look how far your $20 bill goes. So further you kick this can down the road, or we kick this can down the road, the more the
153.
the price is going to increase.
Now, would that same thing be with financing too, or once we get the numbers, we're locked for a period of time?
So it's 153.
has your capital projects listed on it.
Actually, it's 152, isn't it? Oh, no.
That's the funding sources. The next page is the actual list of the projects with the detail behind it.
And I mean, and as you know, we're always chasing grants, and we've been pretty fortunate. I think we've gotten about $3 million worth of grants for our capital projects in the last 3 years. And we have another grant for another sidewalk project that'll be 80% paid for.
Okay, so if our transfer taxes are better than anticipated, and if we continue to get grants, we could pay off this bond sooner.
Yes. And after, we're thinking, 7 years?
I
We
think
could
it's
possibly
within by
refinance.
7 years, you want to start thinking about if your our situation, of course, I'm not going to be here, in 7 years, I'll be 7 years old, so I probably won't be here, but somebody will, and we're going to make sure they know what the plan was. But, you're going to be looking at your finances, and of course, just like they did when they paid off early the water debt and refinanced that and saved, $300,000 to $400,000 a year, I think, at the time on that. The finance people and whoever your town manager is, when the time comes, is going to have to be looking at that. You're not going to make a decision ever where you're not going to continue to have to be looking at the climate, the financial climate, yours, and borrowing and refinancing. So that we're not going to be able to, say what you're going to do, but to the best of our ability at this point in time, with the knowledge of what we have had coming in and all the other things we're doing to make Ocean View be a place that you want to live and buy a property, keeping property values up, suggests that we should be able to maintain the transfer tax revenue at these levels that we've projected to be able to fund this. And with that said, also, remember, you also have on your plate the opportunity to create this tax rate stabilization trust fund, which I don't know of anything like it, and our finance advisors haven't been able to find it. So I say it's unique, and after being here 7 years and understanding our financial situation, of course, nobody wants tax rate increases, but people want services. So with that said, if you think about it, you're also going to have that tool, okay? You're going to have the opportunity, if you stay with me on this. So if we create this, and we have the value of 10 cents when we start it, and we get to FY '28, the next budget year, because we don't need it this year, we balance the budget without any tax rate increase. And it's not established, so we couldn't use it anyway. So if FY '28, we're doing the budget and we need 2 cents, okay? We've been talking about doing incremental, small incrementals, okay? So if you need 2 cents and you utilize that and you give a credit to the taxpayer, to the property owners, on their tax bill. Okay, and then the next year, we need 1 cent. Maybe we need nothing. Maybe you need 2 cents again. Maybe you need 4. You're gonna pay for 2, and you're gonna do whatever you want, 1 cent, 2 cents. We've got a threshold that we're saying there's a guardrail that you should never use more than 2. Of course, your town manager and your finance director are gonna make the recommendation, and they're gonna give you justifications, okay? And then you have to, the next time you do the full town reassessment, that's the beauty of it, because when we're looking at values across the board to make it equitable, which is the reason you do it, we're gonna pay ourselves back, so that we again have this, sustain this, because there's no other place for it to come from. It's either we're spreading it out and making it a smoothing effect for our residents, because there will be a need for tax rate increases, or you're going to be hitting them, every year. So you have that on the other side that's going to help with the general fund, and then this where we already have the transfer tax revenue, funding our trusts. And it's only 2 of our trusts that is identified for this. Of course, we have all of our other investments and everything. We have our unassigned fund balance, which you know is has been very rewarding for us to have, because we've been able to solve problems that we didn't anticipate when we created the budget. I gave several examples of them from one of the first slides where we budget to use it last year, and turns out we might not have to use it, but we could balance the budget with it, and we could have used it, and we wouldn't have done any harm. So I know that's a really, really long explanation, but we're looking at the whole picture, the whole financial picture of, how can we get these things done? There's a lot of things that have been on the books. Borrowing can be scary. We're not doing it recklessly. All of the projects are, read them off. The Birds of Nature Center, and we got over $1 million of grant money for that project already, and we're still trying to get more. The Woodland Park drainage, Oakwood drainage, Woodland Ave drainage study, and Oakwood parking facility, automotive lift, storage building, Betts Avenue drainage, cottages drainage, West Avenue sidewalks south and north, that is, Hunter's Run drainage, Woodland Ave widening, Woodland Ave to Oakland via Central. So, these are things this town's going to have to figure out in the future. Right now we have somebody who I'm not going to say something you haven't said. We have Ken on board, and he's been awesome at getting our projects done and leading them, managing them.
So if we borrow the money, I want Ken to stay for the whole thing.
In 7 years, I'll be 70. So will Russ. Whoever's sitting up there might have some problems.
There is a requirement to spend, remind me, Jamie, if you're still there, how much within so many 3 years?
Yeah, so the reasonable expectation test is what you're referring to, and we need to spend, or the town would need to spend 85% of the borrowed proceeds within 3 years.
So it's not, we're not going to be dragging our feet.
Okay. One other question, not a question, but a statement, and I think I know the answer. According to our town charter, if you borrow more than 0.5%, then you need to have a referendum. What percentage are we borrowing?
This is under, a referendum is very labor intensive, and one of the things we did when we were looking at projects, and we wanted to try to stay under so that we didn't have to do that. We're under it.
Isn't it like 0.48%? Instead of not 5%, not 0.5%.
It is, yes.
Yeah.
Well, and that's based on, the charter also says it has to be based on the last certified tax roll. So that's the March 31 of 25 tax roll, .48. Our new tax roll will be certified and is increasing.
Okay, so
So-
it'll be less.
Yes, it has to be based on the last certified tax roll, which we will have on March 31st. Which also, like I said, is increasing. So it will take the percentage down a little bit, but it will still be under that 0.5%. Yeah.
Does anybody else have any questions? No? Any questions?
Would be happy
I do
to.
have a question. I'm sorry, I do have a question. So if the market just goes for, whether it's national or global, just goes out of control during this time period, does that affect what we're borrowing, how we're paying it in the future?
That's a great question. So we are assuming that this financing would be done as a bond issue, just like the town did back in 2018 with the last refinancing. So once we price the bonds and lock in those interest rates, they are locked in for the life. So, the town doesn't really care what happens, after the pricing of the bonds because those rates are locked in and you have budgetary certainty. There's no variable rate component or anything like that associated with these. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's critical in my, just what's going on, just today's world, and 3 and 4 years from now, there can be a lot of difference. So having it locked in is critical to any decision, in my opinion.
And we feel the same way. It provides budgetary certainty. So I think from Dawn and Carol's perspective, it makes their lives, I don't want to say, easier, but a little bit easier, right? And that might be a good segue to the next page, which is just talking about the timeline on how this might unfold. I don't know if we can jump to the next page. Perfect. So obviously we're here, today, March 3rd, to talk about the financing discussion. We would then be, looking for a informal nod for us and the rest of the financing team, including your solicitor and ultimately Tim Anderson, who has served as your bond counsel in the past, to start the process, if you will, of drafting some of the documents that might be needed. We would be looking then to come back perhaps at your May meeting to introduce what we call a parameters ordinance or resolution, which kind of sets the framework and the guidelines that we and the rest of the financing team would need to operate within in order to actually go out and sell the bonds. After that, there would obviously be a number of readings of that ordinance and resolution, and then looking at maybe a July timeframe for an adoption of that parameters resolution. Once that's adopted, we can really hit the ground running as far as drafting the preliminary official statement, which that's basically the equivalent in our world as a prospectus. So oftentimes when you purchase a mutual fund, you receive a prospectus, which outlines all the details and information of the mutual fund. In our world, we issue preliminary official statements, which go into the security of the bonds being offered, the security for the bonds, information related to the town, et cetera, et cetera. We would then also begin the process of reaching out to the credit rating agency. The town, as part of this financing, would need to obtain a new credit rating. As Carol had mentioned, we are not expecting any surprises with that, but we are hoping certainly to maintain the town's existing credit rating, which is a fantastic one. So hopefully that maintains, we maintain that same rating. And then we would ultimately be looking to price the bonds and lock in those interest rates in the early November timeframe, and then settle on the financing about 2 weeks later. That's the timeline as we see it. Obviously, we could probably move a little bit quicker if we wanted the money quicker. We could also pump the brakes and move more slowly if town council is so desiring. But this, I think, is a good roadmap, at least for now, of what all lays ahead.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the audience?
I was just,
Close.
Thank you. Richard Manfredi, District 1. So, first of all, thank you for having all this information available online to go through. I do have a number of questions, but probably better for offline. But the one question I do have is, with these projects, one thing that from, the police chief, who is extremely transparent, I don't see any projects in here for the improvement of the facilities within the police department, whether it's an expansion or something additional. It's an incredible department. The job the chief has done in staying technologically ahead of things is pretty credible. But I guess I'm just asking, has the police department weighed in on what their needs might be? If you're doing a borrowing of $6.8 million, is there anything that would be helpful to them as you look 3-5 years out, as police and law enforcement services are constantly progressing technologies and other things, if you would give them consideration? That's my only question.
Okay, thank you. I think the short answer is that in this kind of a request, we would ask the police chief and the town manager to talk together and see whether or not it's something that's doable. And then we come to council much later.
And just think, since you're borrowing, if you're considering 6.8, maybe it's 8.8, 9.8, is that even doable?
Mm-hmm.
I understand that, but I was looking at the handout. I didn't realize that on the next to last page, there's a listing of all the projects, proposed projects and the cost. It pretty much takes up all that money. Yeah.
I was going to ask one question of Jamie or Garrett. I just wanted, Jamie or Garrett, if you would just explain how you get paid from this whole process.
Yeah, great question. So we would get paid, and our engagement would be structured in the same fashion that it was in 2018. So our fee or commission, if you will, is a flat fee, and it's paid at the time of settlement, and it's paid out of the bond proceeds. So, we don't bill hourly, we don't send you, monthly or weekly invoices or anything like that. Rather, we would receive one kind of lump sum payment, if you will, at closing, and it would be paid out of the loan proceeds. So, nothing would be coming out of the town's general fund, for instance, for our fee, or frankly, any of the other financing team professionals' fees. So all the fees would be paid out of the loan proceeds at closing.
And they're included in the estimate that we have.
That's
correct. We don't know what all the final numbers would be. We know our estimates for the projects and everything. Yeah, we have to understand. We have to know what the interest rate's going to be. We have to have our new bond rating, hopefully the same. All of those things can impact and may even give us reason to come back and relook at the list. Mm-hmm. Hopefully not, but we'll see. We won't know. You're going to have opportunities to make decisions, is what we're saying before everything's finalized.
Yeah, and Carol, that was a great point that you brought up that I neglected to mention, is the numbers that I outlined for you as far as the cost of the financing on that blue table. Those do assume a budgeted cost of issuance that we feel is conservative, but it is a good point that there would be no additional, fees, for lack of a better word, paid in addition to those numbers. Those numbers are inclusive of all fees that we're assuming at this point.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Well, I want to thank our guests for briefing us. I want to thank Carol and her team for putting together the budget. And I want to thank the town council for spending time on considering the budget. And if there's nothing else, I think we can adjourn.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. Thank you, gentlemen.
Yep, thank you all for your time. Pleasure.